a very interesting news story that crossed on Tuesday. Our Pete Nakos at On3 reporting that a new Georgia state Senate bill filed this week would exempt NIL compensation received by college athletes from the state income tax in the state of Georgia. Introduced by multiple senators, Brandon Beach, Greg Dolezal, Ben Watson, Carden Summers, and Frank Glenn. It would create a distinct recruiting advantage for Georgia universities, Pete writes. I don't know that it would be an advantage. I think they're trying to blunt a disadvantage that Georgia universities have. But it's just so funny because you know me. I'm Mr. Athlete Empowerment. I'm Mr. Pay the Players. I don't think this one's going to go over very well with the electorate other than the really rabid Georgia fans. As a Tennessee fan in my mentions said, the only people who are going to be really for this are the ones who get down on all fours and bark at other human beings. So here's the deal. Did this strike you the same way it struck me, that they are trying to negate a recruiting advantage that schools in Florida, Texas, and Tennessee might have? What do Florida, Texas, and Tennessee have in common?
No state income tax.
That's right. That's right. And you hear, I don't know, we hear this during pro athlete free agency, where it's always like, oh, so-and-so is going to sign with the Heat because they don't have to pay the state income tax in Florida for all their home games. Because the pro athletes actually do have to pay the state income tax on road games when they travel. But the idea is, if you're an NBA player, 41 games a year are in Florida. Well, I guess if you play for the Heat or the Magic, you're also playing at the Heat or the Magic. But
I didn't know that part, the away part.
Well, I was reminded of that when the Luka Doncic trade happened, because they were talking about how he's actually going to lose a lot of money getting traded from the Mavericks to the Lakers. One, because he can't sign the Supermax contract. So he would have been able to sign a bigger contract had he been with the Mavericks. But two, because he goes to a state with a 14% state income tax from a state with a 0% state income tax. So he's taxed on all his home games at 14%.
You'll have to walk me through this, because I live in a state where there's no state income tax, and you do too.
But other than the first 7 years of my life in South Carolina, I've only lived in states with no state income tax, because I also lived in Tennessee.
But the way that it actually
my whole working life
is they just tax you in other areas. So when you're an adult with a home, you still end up paying that money. You just pay it to a different type of tax, right? Our homeowners tax, or our property tax on a given year, is more expensive than my entire cost of living when I lived in Ohio.
It depends on your state. Yes, states kind of get you one way or the other. But for the case of these college athletes, it's probably a little bit different.
It doesn't matter to them because they don't own homes, right? But they're
probably renting, yeah. So,
but for me, doesn't it cost a heck of a lot more to register my car in Texas than it does in other states? There are ways that we are taxed that are higher as a result.
Or some states have a higher sales tax, correct? In Florida, the sales tax is a little higher. Now in Florida, they do tack on, extra taxes on hotel rooms and rental cars. They try to get the tourists to pay a lot of the freight if they can. Right. But the property taxes that you pay to your county may be higher. So yes, there are ways that they get you. But in this particular case, you've got these people, which I understand the intent that the lawmakers have there. I think they're going to find out there are fewer college football fans in Georgia than they think, even though Georgia is a state probably that has a very high concentration of college football fans.
Yeah, well, you need to be like a economics professor here for me, and break down the downside to this, because it seems like a very limited scope, doesn't it?
Yeah, so it's 5.39% is the state income tax rate in Georgia. Well, the downside for who? Because I would worry as a state senator, this would get me primaried by voters who don't get this tax break, who are like, why are you giving it to them?
But them is such a small amount of people, isn't it?
It is, but why are we carving out anything? We're talking about 5% here. And
yeah, because go Dogs, that's why.
Is a 5%, right? Go Dogs. Do you think there are enough Georgia fans that care that deeply about college football more than they care about whether they're getting taxed and somebody else is not, that are going to be okay? Like, if you lived in
getting
Georgia,
taxed either way, right?
would you get mad at your if you're your state senator who represents you, would you get mad at them for introducing this bill, or would you be like, yeah, go Dogs?
That's an interesting question because people like to get mad about these sort of things a lot. Like my general thought process, and I don't know if this is just normal as it pertains to politics, is okay, what's my tax rate going to be and what am I in for? Like, I don't ever really find myself comparing myself to other people, but at the same time too, it's like there is probably a large segment of the population in general that already resents how much money that college players are going to be getting in comparison to the zero they used to be getting, at least above board zero. And then now to create an income tax, relief for people who are already getting paid more money than a lot of people probably think they deserve. You and I, and our takes on whether or not college athletes should be making a bunch of money are based on a seasoned exposure to how much work, effort, and sacrifice these players have to make in order to not only play for these schools, but to get there to begin with. So, like, I don't know.
And also how much money the enterprise brings in.
Right. And like, I don't know, you'd have to, again, like this is an economics thing, but like if Georgia is better at football, how much better off is Athens, the town, from a financial level?
Right.
Like, I don't know, does it make a difference? But I think it does, right? The more excitement, the more traffic, the more hotels being rented, the more restaurants being, eaten at, like all these things.
Is this going to make a difference? Like, is some recruit that is choosing between Tennessee and Georgia, or Tennessee and Georgia Tech, or, because it would apply to all the college athletes in the state.
Well, the question you have to ask too is that, do you have
let's be real here. This is about Georgia. This isn't about Georgia Tech. You want a deal? 2 favorites for $7. It's got to be Wendy's. The Wendy's Dynamic Duos, the newest thing. You remember the Super Value menu? You remember the Biggie Bag? Boy, I had some good Biggie Bags back in the day. But this is the next generation of that. Choose any 2 of these 4 items for just $7. You got the spicy chicken sandwich, you got Dave's single, you got the classic chicken sandwich, and you got a 10-piece nuggs. Like, I don't know. I'm so nug crazy after the last few months that I might just go 2 10-piece nuggs. But the Dave's single and a 10-piece nuggs, ooh, that is a nice, you get the whole farm there. You get the cow, you get the chicken. 16 different combinations, all delicious. You can make a hot poultry power couple with a spicy chicken sandwich and spicy buffalo nugs. You can also go double beef with 2 quarter-pound Dave singles. You create your ultimate duo today in the Wendy's app. 2 favorites, $7. Got to be Wendy's. Terms apply.
But like, are the people who are around the players who are agreeing to these NIL deals even seasoned enough in many cases to kind of understand the difference between those 2 things, right? Like, we talk a lot about
there's some of them, because look, there's agents,
sure, but
there's agents who represent NFL players who do this math. Like, they say the Dolphins need to pay one thing and the Giants need to pay another thing, because the same amount of money being paid to play for the Dolphins, you take more of that home than if you're playing for the Giants. So
I know, but if you play for the Dolphins and you buy a nice house on Key Biscayne, aren't you paying like 7% more per year annually on the property tax? Like, it just like
you do understand that property is expensive in the New York metropolitan area as well. So
I do. Yeah, I do.
Yeah. So here's what I'm saying. Is the juice worth the squeeze here if you're the politician? I don't think it is. I think this is one where, because I understand, like, if you're in a southern state, you want to protect the home state football programs. That feels like a nice bipartisan thing. This probably is the one thing where you stepped over the line a little bit.
Well, the thing with this too is
this will be very popular among the electorate.
You don't really see a lot of laws being passed that are so blatantly obvious to help football be better, right?
Yeah.
Like, this is like I always find it interesting because, as somebody who isn't too seasoned as it pertains to politics, I always find it interesting when politics kind of neighbors into college football, and I think in part it's necessary as a result of trying to figure out how to fairly compensate people with money they're entitled to. But I don't know that this is the first time that someone's been like, let's like introduce a law that really only benefits Georgia football players. Like,
I mean,
never seen something like
they've
that
done
before.
this before. They've tightened the public records laws just to keep people from getting information about Georgia football. So
Yeah, it's true. Although you hopefully can make the case that maybe there's other benefits to that. Like, I don't know what the other benefits to this are, other than
right. There aren't, and that's the thing. Like, if I were, let me put it this way: if I were a politician opposing one of these people in a primary, which means I'm of the same party as them, I would be like, how come you don't give it to soldiers in Georgia? Like, wouldn't that be a better group? Or teachers in Georgia? Wouldn't that be a better group? So,
but what's the group? The thing that's so interesting to me is that when you compare the actual group to the entire population, what's that like at most 200 people?
It's a small group. It's a small number. And that's the thing. And that's what they're going to say. This is just a small number. It's negligible amount, but it's the principle of the thing. Like, if you want Georgia or Georgia Tech to be able to cover, like, just have them pay 5.39% more in NIL deals. Just donate 5.39% more to the collective. Like, you can make that work.
Yeah.
This probably isn't the way to get that done.
But I wonder if you could like galaxy brain it to say that in years where Georgia's competing for a national championship, the sales tax collected in the Atlanta metropolitan area was 19% higher than it was in years where they weren't good, and then try to like spin it into something like that.
You can economic impact any football success. Like, those studies are great. Like, the bowl games do this every year. The Alamo Bowl brings $3 billion to the San Antonio area.
And here's the thing that we're not saying out loud that needs to be said out loud too, is that the players who are coming to Georgia that are going to have an impact on the team from like are they going to win the national title standpoint or not, are players who are making so much money that it's kind of hard to like boo-hoo yourself over the 5.39% too, right? Like, that's like an entire divide.
I honestly don't think that 5% is going to cost Georgia or Georgia Tech a player. I don't.
Yeah.
Now, the California one, maybe, like, that might. So if I'm Lincoln Riley, maybe I'm going to Sacramento and talking to some people. But
California strikes me as the type of state that would be less inclined to even discuss this. I don't know. It's just a hunch.
You think that would definitely get you primary in California? There's nobody there aren't enough people who are a fan of enough teams in California to make that work. So absolutely
from a selfish standpoint, though, I kind of like love the passion. Like,
I mean, that's the thing. Like, the funniest part was I read the story that Pete wrote, and my first thought was, look at them thinking about Cruton. They never stop thinking about Cruton.
That's why they're good. Because people care.
Well, it's not even just why Georgia's good. It's like this. I appreciate the politicians at least understanding a little bit of what drives the electorate. But I think this probably,
we have to say it though,
underestimates the group of people who'd be like, I'd rather you not give that carve out.
Yeah, if there are people, even Georgia fans, I think, who are living in paycheck to paycheck situations, right? Or, are down on money in Georgia and the rural areas around it. They might be Georgia football fans, but they also would probably be offended.
They're money fans before they're Georgia football fans.
My dad taught me when I was a kid, maybe a rule for life is that everything is important until it starts talking infringing on someone's pockets, and then all of a sudden morals go out the window, right? Like, so it's just kind of like, and it's like, you also too, like, there's plenty of people in need in Georgia that could probably use those breaks a little bit more, and I can understand the like when you said the soldier thing, like, that kind of hit me. It's like, yeah, I mean, there are people who have sacrificed for our country in a way that KJ Bolden hasn't, and it's like, and he'll be fine financially anyway. So, it's funny, but at the same time too, like, I could see how that could, rub people the wrong way.
All politics are local, and it's localized entirely in your wallet.